My name is Mehmet Ozalp. I'm a professor of Islamic studies at Charles Sturt University and Isra Academy. This is the part 2 video on the life of Said Nursi. In this video, we're going to talk about Said Nursi's involvement in Istanbul in politics and society and his courage and involvement in World War I. Last time in part 1, we talked about Said Nursi as a scholar growing up, his incredible education, and he became a scholar as in his teens, and he became famous as this saintly, knowledgeable, very intelligent scholar. So by the time Said Nursi comes towards the end of his 20s or 30 years old, he's starting to see some problems and patterns in the Muslim world, in Ottoman Empire at that time. The people that he speaks to are either graduated from madrasas or what we call mektabs. The mektabs were set up in 19th century in order to catch up the European development, civilization, and industrial revolution. But the problem that Said Nursi saw was the people who graduated from madrasa seemed to be knowledgeable in religion, but they were a little bit naive in worldly matters, what was going on in the world, and they were dogmatic, even bigoted at times. But those people who graduated from the mektabs were very well educated. They knew science and civilization, but also they tend to be irreligious. They did not practice religion. They did not know religion. So these people were at odds to one another, or they saw society, the world differently. So Said Nursi came up with the idea that he should establish a university where both science and religion would be taught. He said that when you combine the two, wisdom prevails instead of bigotry or irreligion. He also said that these two sources of education, like two wings of a bird, you can only fly with two wings, but you cannot with only one wing. So he came up with this university project. He decided to go to Istanbul and petition with the Sultan Abdulhamid II, the Caliph, and get some funding for this university to be established in the eastern provinces of the Ottoman Empire, in the heartlands where Turks, Arabs, Persians, and Kurds intersect with one another. So it was a very important project for him. So he goes to Istanbul, and he's completely unknown, and he dresses like the Eastern people. Most people see him as a peasant. They do not pay attention. So he goes to this hotel and puts a sign on the hotel room: all questions answered, no questions asked. Remember, this was the dream that he saw when he was young, with Prophet Muhammad appearing in the dream. So people are intrigued by this. They come and visit him to test him out. And the people who come are really astonished by the level of his knowledge and intelligence. And the word quickly gets around that there's this young scholar from the East who's dressed strangely, who's saying all questions are answered, no questions asked. So people, scholars flock to test him out, and he passes all the tests. One day, as he's walking in the Fatih Mosque, he comes across a discussion group, and he approaches them, says, "What are you talking about?" And they say, "Who are you? Are you a peasant or shepherd or something?" Then when he finds out what they're talking about, he actually starts to explain and talk about it from Quran, verses from the Quran. He quotes hadith from memory and gives a very rational and wise explanation or answer, and they're astonished by this. So this causes a sensation in Istanbul, and it becomes very famous very quickly. But unfortunately, his attempts at petitioning the Sultan fails. He cannot get a word or attention in the palace. And around that time, 1908, there is a coup attempt, and the Sultan Abdulhamid II is deposed. An organization or a political party called Ittihad wa Tarakki, it means Progress and Unity Party, they take power and replace the Caliph. And this party actually, from 1908 to 1918, they're going to destroy the entire Ottoman Empire. They're going to drag Ottoman Empire into World War I. Well, we don't know that at that stage, but they come to power through a military coup. And Several months later, there is a counter-military coup where some religious officers in the Ottoman army, they tried to do a counter coup and take over the government. That fails. Now, Said Nursi, while all these things are happening, he's giving speeches, writing articles about matters of politics and society, but he's always trying to reconcile, talk about unity, not going to violence, democratic ideals, republican ideals of freedom, virtue, justice, and so on. But because he was a member of this Mohammedan Union, which was an association, he was also arrested by the court-martial. So he was court-martialed. He's going into the court. People are hanged on the side of the road while he's entering the court. And the judges ask him, is it true that you want Sharia just like all these people? He says, if I had 1,000 heads and you took all of them for a single matter of Sharia, I would gladly give all my lives, because Sharia is source of prosperity, happiness, justice, and virtue. I want Sharia, yes, but not like these people. He meant he doesn't want it through violence or coups. They also asked him, are you a member of the Mohammedan Union? And his answer is, yes, I am a member of the Mohammedan Union. The president or the leader of this movement is Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The headquarters is in Mecca, Kaaba. See, he basically meant that he's a member of the Muslim community, Muslim Ummah, not just the association. And judges somehow find him very courageous and like him, and they acquitted him. So he wasn't charged, and so he saves his life, basically. So frustrated, he leaves Istanbul, goes back to East for several years. In one of these journeys, he goes to Damascus. So he gives a very famous sermon in the Umayyad Mosque. Reportedly, there was a crowd of 10,000 people and up to 100 scholars in the audience. So he gives a long khutbah on the problems of the Muslim world and solutions for them. So he says there are three major problems in the Muslim world: disunity, poverty, and ignorance. So unless we solve these, we're not going to progress like Europeans. He says you can only have unity by the combination of ideas, that people see the world in a similar way, and you cannot have union of ideas without proper education. So education is the key starting point to solve the problems of the Muslim world. And it then goes on, talks about 6 sicknesses and 6 remedies, and this sermon gets published. And if you really think about it, these problems still grapple the Muslim world, unfortunately. So from 1910, we're in 2025. I think Muslim world surely progressed, but still we have disunity, there's a comparatively poverty and lack of proper education. So Said Nursi, after this Damascus sermon, there's some changes in Istanbul. Now there is a Sultan Mehmet Reshad, who is the Sultan and the Caliph. Sultan Mehmet Reshad decides to do a journey to Balkans, to visit some of the countries there. So Ottomans were losing land and territory and prestige in Europe, especially in the Balkans areas. So he wanted to somehow reverse that. So Said Nursi is invited as part of the delegation on this trip with the Sultan. So he goes and he gets an audience with the Sultan. He talks about this university idea that he always had. He called it Medresetu Zahra, similar to Al-Azhar University or Madrasa at the time. So it was going to be like it. As I said earlier, it was going to teach all languages relevant in the Muslim world, and all knowledge was to be taken as a whole, just like before in the golden ages of Islam. So Sultan Reshad actually likes this idea, and he promises to fund this university. So Said Nursi, after that trip, goes back to East to Van, and he establishes a madrasa until he builds this university. It's called Horhor Madrasa, and he had up to 200 to 400 students at a time. So become very famous. People were flocking to study in this madrasa. So he gets some of the money, and the foundations of this university are laid. But unfortunately, we're talking about 1911-ish, and unfortunately, Ottoman Empire gets into some of the Balkan wars. Then there's North Africa wars. They're in need of money, so the funds are cut off. So this project does not go ahead. We're now at the brink of World War I, and Said Nursi is still teaching in this madrasa, but it's a standard madrasa, it's not a university. And then Ottoman Empire goes into World War I in 1914. So Ottoman Empire is fighting against the French, British, Italians, and also Russians. So Russians are attacking from the Caucasus, from the east, where Said Nursi and his students are. Russians actually advance quite rapidly in the eastern parts of present-day Turkey. And Said Nursi raises a volunteer army made up of his students and other volunteers in the region, so up to 4,000 members, and he's appointed by Enver Pasha to be the commander of this unit. So Enver Pasha was one of the three key pashas of the party that was ruling Ottoman Empire at the time. We'll come back to him later on as well in the third part. He's a key person. So Said Nursi is now fighting against the Russians together with his troops. So he's a commander now. He's a commander and a scholar at the same time. He also, around this time, begins to write a complete commentary of the Quran. He calls it Isharatul Ijaz. And this is a very important commentary. He intends to write 60 volumes of this. It doesn't eventuate, but the first volume is completed. Later on, when he comes back to Istanbul, it gets published. We have that today. It's an excellent tafsir of the Quran, but unfortunately he could not finish it because of World War I. So in the thick of the battle, Russians really press, and Said Nursi gets shot at. In one instance, he receives 4 bullets, and 3 of them miraculously strike metal parts on his dressing or uniform, and one of them hits his shoulder, so he survives quite extraordinarily. But eventually, he breaks his leg. They are surrounded under a bridge, and at night, one of his students goes to Russians and surrenders. So Said Nursi is taken as prisoner of war, and is taken to Kostroma prisoner of war camp. Kostroma is in the northwest of Russia. It's quite far away and near Volga River. But the good thing about this area was that there was a small Muslim community made up of the Tatar Muslims in that area as well. One day the camp is visited by the commander-in-chief of the Caucasus Front of the Russian army, Nikola Nikolaevich, who is the uncle of the Tsar, very important person. He comes to the camp, he's walking around, everyone's standing up, in respect, except Said Nursi. Said Nursi is sitting on a chair, so the commander passes him. He realizes he doesn't stand up. He makes an excuse and goes around and comes back again. Still, he doesn't stand up. A third time, doesn't stand up. Now, he stops and talks to Said Nursi through an interpreter. He says, "Why didn't you get up?" He says, "Do you know who I am?" He says, "Yes, I know you are the commander of the Russian army." He says, "Why didn't you get up?" So Said Nursi replies, he says, "I'm a scholar with faith in my heart. You're a disbeliever. If I stood up to you, it would be disrespect to my belief as a Muslim." And the commander, Nikola Nikolaevich, is really offended by that. He says, "Are you saying that I don't have faith and I'm a disbeliever? That's an insult to me. It's an insult to the Russian army, and it's an insult to the Tsar. Quickly put this guy to court-martial." So they have the court-martial set up, and he's trialed, and he's found guilty of offending the Russian army and the Russian people and the Tsar. and sentenced to death. So Said Nursi is actually, he's going to death, and some of the people, other people in the camps go up to him and say, look, what are you doing? You're just going to die for nothing. What are you doing? You're going to die over nothing. Just go and apologize. He might forgive you. And Said Nursi says, look, I'm eager to meet my Lord in the afterlife. I just need a passport, and this guy's giving me a passport. Don't worry about it. He's just fearless towards death, and that pride in him as a Muslim prevents him to apologize to the commander. But eventually, they actually set up the gallows. He's about to be hanged. He says, give me 15 minutes. He gets ablution. I just want to pray for 2 cycles of prayer, as they do, as people who are about to be executed. This is a common request. So just when he's praying, the commander, Nikola Nikolaevich, comes and realizes that this person is a genuine believer, and he did not intend to offend him at all, and he was just doing what he thought was best for his faith. So he goes up to Said Nursi and apologizes and says, your sentence has been revoked, you can walk free. So this is a very interesting anecdote, and that shows the courage of Said Nursi. While he is in this concentration camp, he finds a small mosque in that area, gets permission to go and pray there at night in cold weather. This sets a remarkable impact on him. And he says, if I return for the rest of my life, I'm going to spend my time in caves, worshipping Allah. I'm not going to be involved in politics and society. I'm feeling I'm getting old. He's about 40 years old at that time. But then in 1917, there's a Russian Revolution. The Tsar is toppled. The communism is declared. There's confusion in Russia. And several months later, Said Nursi finds a way to escape. He escapes and on foot goes from northwestern Russia through Poland and Germany and Austria, comes back to Istanbul. This is an extraordinary journey. We still don't know how he did that, and he did not know the languages in the area. How did he travel? How did he get by without being hassled, arrested, or killed? It's extraordinary. So the photo that you see in the thumbnail of this video was taken in Germany when he passed by the German customs. So Said Nursi comes back to Istanbul, but it's 1918, end of World War I. Ottoman Empire lost the war together with Germany. Even though it fought courageously at Gallipoli and other fronts, it could not continue the war by itself. And the Ottoman Sultan surrendered. 95% of the Muslim world is colonized or captured by European powers. It looks bleak what will happen to Muslim world. A lot of people think that it's end of times and Qiyamah will occur. Said Nursi now, at the age of 40, looking for a new path to forge for the Muslim world, and we will talk about that in the next video. Thank you for watching.